I've been playing Air, Memories of Old, and while the game is enjoyable, I find several areas in which the experience is lacking. These are areas that plague high-profile games to an extent, but are usually more prevalent in indie titles simply due to the sheer amount of released indie games. And while the game is visually and emotionally very pleasant, the symptoms it suffers from are not new and can be avoided with a little bit of care. There's plenty of other games that have similar issues to the ones I'll list here, so don't take this as an attack on Air if you find this game particularly to your liking, but I will be using it as a platform for examples. Now, there is no denying the game looks good. Personally, I would have the full screen fog effect start further back, even if the current setup does add to the overall dreamy feel of the game. Regardless, I like the clean, low-poly style indie games tend to go for, as well as the substitution of textures for a simple color palette. I especially like the way the developers made the sun angular here instead of rounded, which adds a really nice touch. The vegetation, while sparse, feels alive. Tree canopies move about, bushes and grass react to the avatar walking through them or jumping on them. The way the wind is portrayed is also visually very pleasing, and it helps guide the player through some nooks and crannies. Environments are easily readable, while the balanced, well-thought-out color palette provides a clean, consistent look to the game. One thing the game excels at is conveying emotion, either through music, through hidden dialogues, or through visual storytelling devices. Overall, dialogues and text serve their purpose, although I would prefer if they were less on the nose at times. One particular pet peeve I do have is one of the characters is named John. I mean, why John? With all the world building and the other amazing names the game has to offer, John just seems too out of place for the experience. It simply does not fit. Gameplay-wise, the game offers two separate gameplay loops. The first and most abundant is played in the overworld or domain world, where you are free to explore, talk with characters, find lost murals and memories, and search for clues for your next objective. The second, and much more limited and linear, is while inside temples. Here the focus shifts on moving from point A to point B in order to find an object, and while doing so, completing very basic tasks I would be hard-pressed to call puzzles. Even so, it is quite enjoyable to play if your aim is to spend some quality time with a simple and relaxing game. Now, mechanically, at its most basic, the game offers walking or flying. While the flying part is absolutely amazing, at least at first, the walking part could use a few more mechanics. There is a distinct lack of any type of platforming. Something as simple as sprinting or vaulting would make quite a difference. There were plenty of times when I wanted to move over a short distance quickly, but was forced to slowly walk about, as flying would give more hassle than it's worth due to the extreme difference in speed. And as fun as flying is, it can be cumbersome for finer navigation in tighter spaces. Some extra platforming mechanics would be really welcome here. You do have jumping, but the basic risk-reward system of the mechanic is undermined by the fact that you can fly. There is no real downside to missing a jump. You can always just fly away and try again. Sprinting, vaulting, squeezing through tight corners, or just adding gameplay value to sliding down slopes. These are a few mechanics that could have been implemented to add flavor to the way players experience the game. This problem is just compounded once inside a temple. You are unable to fly while indoors, so you're stuck with just walking around and jumping. I also failed to find an explanation as to why the flying mechanic is unavailable indoors. I understand the technical reasons behind the decision, as it would break traversing and make navigating in flight impossible due to cramped spaces, but there is no reason given in-game for this decision, which makes the experience feel disjointed. It's good practice to try and justify design decisions through gameplay or story. A bad or generic explanation is usually still better than no explanation at all. The flying in itself, as mentioned, is super enjoyable. It's easy to control the speed and direction when flying through the open air, far above any obstacles, and the way extra music tracks fade in while in flight really makes the experience feel special. There are some issues with finder navigation, but the main downside for me in this mechanic is that you can immediately fly to any part of the map you want. I believe limiting the range and rewarding players with extended flight range through completion of the game's objectives would add to the value of the mechanic. It would also add mystery to the game, as it would gate off certain parts of the world and add an inherent reason for players to push on with their play. Allowing players to freely roam the world and find story beats and locations completely out of order only fuels confusion. There is also no way for the developers to know from which direction a player will approach some key place structure, which makes guiding players completely reliant on the compass rather than the world and its features. I believe this serves as a good example of why allowing the players to do whatever they want from the get-go isn't always the right course of action, and why posing limitations and locking away parts of the experience with challenges is a much better way to go. I do realize one could argue at this point that I'm missing what the game is about, that it's about being free, about making your own choices, about exploration and progression, about giving the reins of the experience into the player's hands. Games like Skyrim or Fallout have large worlds, for instance, and most of them can be accessed from the start of the game, with some notable exceptions. But if that is the argument, then Air has other issues that need addressing. The world, for instance, while large and beautiful, feels empty. It's too sparsely populated with characters, and if you go and just explore for a while, it would be really nice to have your objectives at hand without having to fly back to a particular character and going through the dialogues again just to refresh your memory. There are ways to solve this. A waypoint on the compass I feel would be too obtrusive for this game. A journal, however, similarly styled to the world map, would work wonders. It would pay homage to games like Morrowind, where a diary was your best friend, when the game still gave you clues as to where you need to go, but it was up to the player to actually put some effort into finding the place of the next objective rather than just following a needle on the compass. I realize Air does give directions without providing a fixed point to follow, but it does not have a central place like a diary or a journal in which clues and dialogues would be collected. That is the part that is missing from this equation. If there was more to the gameplay in the overworld, some easy platforming, some side quests, or a few additional quirky characters, going back and relearning clues would be much more rewarding and would not feel like such a chore. A diary's secondary purpose would also be a way for players to measure their progress throughout the game, to see what was achieved and to give more reason to push on. As it stands, the experience sort of blends into a blur, and lack of variety in gameplay makes it hard to distinguish one location or achieved task from the next. Another thing I can tie into this is player reward, or rather lack thereof. Exploration, while being a central lure of this game, has very few rewards other than finding new places, structures and events that are important for the story to move forward. You can call into focus memories of travelers that came before you by illuminating certain floating glyphs with your lantern, but they don't really add all that much to the overall experience. I often found myself walking around, exploring the world and temples without actually achieving or finding anything significant. There are a few achievements sprinkled throughout, but they are not reason enough to comb through the world. Both the main world and the temples are guilty of this, although I believe temples are worse off due to the removal of the flight mechanic. A few extra characters, minor challenges or tasks, perhaps collectible items, anything that would add value to gameplay and the world building would be most welcome. The last thing I want to touch on is polish. Making a game is hard, and there are bound to be issues with any game that comes out, more so when a game is created by a small team. But there are certain things that should be picked up during development. The camera, for instance, has issues in tight spaces. It's way too easy to get the camera lodged between a prop and a character, resulting in it clipping through both. It can also just clip through walls at random spots, as if collision was moved into the geometry a bit. Now this is all more annoyance than an issue, but what this game does suffer from is the abundance of ways the avatar can get stuck. I got stuck in tight spaces several times in the first 30 to 45 minutes of playtime alone, and it reflects badly on any game if you need to quit the menu several times due to bugs or glitches. I realize it's hard for small and underfunded teams to have proper QA and testing, which is where standardizing player metrics and sticking to them come in play. Set up player metrics, implement and test them. Find the weak spots, iterate on what you can, and put limits on your design based on your results. For example, if you know the maximum width of a gap the avatar can safely pass through is 40 centimeters and the avatar collision is 30 centimeters, make sure that no gap is between these two numbers. Anything under 30 should be walked over, 30 to 40 should be disallowed, and anything over 40 is safe for the avatar to pass through. That way, you have a system you know works, and clearly communicating it to your team and explaining why certain rules are in place will minimize chances of issues down the line. Another thing is overlapping controls for different actions on the gamepad. While this cannot always be avoided, Air is simple enough in its design that it should not happen. Jumping, transforming into the bird, and enabling prompts, for instance, is mapped to A on the controller. Jumping and transforming do not clash. Press A once to jump, twice to transform. But it does clash with prompts. Having everything mapped to the same button removes the option of players transforming and flying away from a mural after reading it, as it instead re-triggers the prompt. This could easily be avoided by mapping prompts to the B button, for instance, which is unused at the moment. The last thing is just quality of life stuff. The game runs fine, I failed to notice any significant frame rate drops, but it does stutter randomly at times. There are a few issues with the avatar standing on the air due to loose collision, and some very unnecessary invisible walls that could have been avoided with better geometry placement. I was also able to reach a few areas I shouldn't have, and there are a few overlapping faces on geometry. Just minor things that don't break anything, but it shows the team was less experienced and limited in size. So, what are the teaching moments? Generally speaking, making a game with emphasis on feel, emotion, and conveying a story is perfectly fine, but you need to support the experience with proper gameplay, unless your aim is to make a walking simulator. Dear Esther or the Stanley Parable come to mind as two great examples of that. If you have characters in your world, use them to make a rapport with your player, to help tether your players to the game world. It's okay to have open-ended exploration, but you need to add clear, short-term goals that players can review at their leisure, so if they do decide to wander off, they can rejoin the main game at a moment's notice. Make sure all the mechanics are enjoyable and work together to create a fun experience, and give more options to your players in how they navigate your world, if exploration and navigation are your core design pillars. Make sure to justify your decisions and limitations within the context of the game, and lock away certain abilities behind progress. Make sure to adequately reward players for the way they play the game, and use some extra time to figure out the game's control scheme and control mapping. Last but not least, make sure to define player metrics and gray areas in level and world design that can lead to problems and should be avoided. As for level designers in particular, it's your job to make sure the game is fun to play. While it is true that game designers are the ones that come up with the core pillars, the base mechanics, and are generally the driving force behind the coherent vision of the game, level designers are the ones that will spend the most time with the game through all of its different iterations and have a direct impact on moment-to-moment events within the game. If you've exhausted all options and mechanics in an effort to make the game enjoyable, but the flow is still missing something, don't be afraid to speak up. Ask your coworkers, your seniors and leads for their input and advice, and do some of your own research by playing similar successful games and studying how they accomplished their design goals. In most cases, you and the team will come up with a great solution through teamwork and iteration, but sometimes you might come across a deeper issue within the game that others haven't come across yet or missed. Regardless of your position, the team should value your input when it is well constructed and well presented, and when accepting it will lead to a better overall experience for the end user, the player. I would recommend playing this game for new or inexperienced game developers and anyone that wants a simple yet relaxing experience. There is a lot to enjoy in this game, and there is a lot you can learn from it. Thank you for your time.